Hello, it's Janello. On today's episode, it's everything you need to know about milk bread. So first up, what is milk bread? This particular loaf I got from a place called Paris Baguette, which is actually a Korean bakery, which will make sense in a second why I say it that way, but let's get into what it actually looks like. You'll notice right off the bat about this bread that it's cut pretty thick. That's partially because it's so light and fluffy that if you don't cut it thick, it kind of just falls apart with everything. It's not that much different than normal bread. The ingredients are what you would expect: salt, flour, water, and of course yeast. But there's one special ingredient that makes milk bread, well, milk bread, and that's where things kind of get complicated. It's made with something called a water roux, which maybe should be called a milk roux, but, well, go with me. A water roux is a water, flour, milk mixture that gives the bread ultimately its fluffiness, I think somehow through the fat content in the milk. Here's where history makes it a little bit more complicated. You'll often hear milk bread referred to as Japanese milk bread. This is because the origins sort of trace back to Japan. Specifically, a place in Japan called Hokkaido. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Hokkaido is famous for milk, and that milk is used specifically in making the milk bread, which is where the claim to the Japanese origin comes from. Others say that it is of Chinese origin, made popular by a woman named Yvonne Cho, who put out a cookbook called 65 Degrees C. I guess that means Celsius. What's interesting about these two origin stories is that the roux has a name in both cultures. In Japanese, that milk roux is called yudan. Probably mispronouncing that also. In Chinese, that milk roux is called tangzong. They're basically the same thing, just from different places. So I did a little digging on timelines, and here's what I came up with. In 2007, 65 Degrees C was a cookbook published by Yvonne Chen. In 2013, Christina Ho, a food blogger, referenced Yvonne's recipe. In 2014, Food 52 referenced both Christina and Yvonne chronicling milk bread and how to make it. And today, Instagram has over 54,000 posts under the hashtag milk bread. I would say that makes it somewhat of an internet phenomenon. But there's controversy here in whether or not it was Japanese in origin, or it really was the proliferation of this cookbook that gave it its modern popularity and its origins. One other thing that I uncovered was an origin that points to Yokohama Bakery in Japan. This was opened in 1862 by an Englishman named Robert Clark. There was one other interesting twist that I found when doing my research. There's a Korean milk bread, so this whole thing could have come from Korea. And in fact, this bread right here, as I said earlier, comes from a place called Paris Baguette, which is a Korean bakery. All that said, it's totally inconclusive. Let's move on. All right, so let's get into a little taste test of this thing. Kind of like white bread. I mean, really, it just tastes like a thick piece of white bread with maybe a little bit more something to it. I mean, I want to say fat content because I know that there's more fat content in here than normal white bread, but I think that's just in my head. But it is delicious. So what do you make with this? Something pretty delicate. I got a couple ideas. First thing that came to mind was the French omelet of egg sandwiches. It has to be light, it has to be delicate, it can't be heavy with meats and things like that. it just won't hold up. The bread just won't hold up. But a nice, fluffy, buttery egg on this fluffy, buttery milk bread could be a pretty good thing. That's nice. It looks delicate. It holds up to the bread pretty well. No toasting involved. Let's give it a taste. I mean, that's pretty perfect. I knew it was gonna be good. I did not think it was gonna be this good. The second thing I thought that would be good is also in the sandwich world. I'm talking PB&J, but with a little bit of a twist, and this requires some toasting. Oh yeah. A little toast, a little banana. A little peanut butter, a little jelly, warm. That is also very tasty. It feels like something you'd put on milk bread. Like a normal PB&J goes on super Wonder White, call it a day, done, no toasting, nothing like this. This with a little bit more thickness to the bread. You toast it up and then you still have that really soft white bread on the inside, but you get a little extra texture, a little kind of crunch going on. And then the oozing of all the stuff that you see falling out of this thing right now. Flavor bomb, really good. So that is everything I know about milk bread and why it is such a phenomenon. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Go out, get yourself some milk bread, or get ambitious and make yourself some milk bread and leave me a comment as to what you thought of the taste or what you did with it, or just what you would do with it if you got your hands on some milk bread. That's going to do it for this episode. I'm Janello, and I'll see you next week.